Before there was an id Software, the core team that would later evolve into id worked at a company called Softdisk. The team at the time worked on a service called Gamer's Edge, where they developed games for the emerging PC market. John Carmack and the guys from id figured out that they could port Super Mario 3 to the PC. Only they didn't want to give that technology to their current employer, and decided they would keep it for themselves. John Romero and John Carmack would work off the clock with the computers they borrowed from work so that they could create Super Mario 3 for the PC. They eventually finished the project and sent it to Nintendo in Redmond, Washington. Nintendo would ultimately reject their offer in favor of sticking with their own platform. However, id would draw their attention in the future. Years later, after the team had left Softdisk and founded id Software, they made a breakthrough in the world of gaming. The game Doom, which they would claim to be the #1 reason for lost productivity in the world, was blazing through the shareware market. Something to remember about PCs in the mid to early 90s was that they weren't in every home at that point in time, and they were widely considered just machines for work. The game was a colossal success for id, and it did so well that it was even noticed by Nintendo, the company that had declined their Mario 3 port, and Nintendo asked them to port it to the SNES for a fee of around $100,000. There are plenty of Doom ports to different consoles, the Atari Jaguar, the Sega 32X port, but none of those have as fun an origin story as the Super Nintendo port of Doom and Wolfenstein. What is interesting is id has had some unusual events happen with dealing with ports of their titles to the Super Nintendo. The first story is for the development of the Super Nintendo port of Doom. The story is that Sculpted Software developed the Super Nintendo port without id's permission, and then approached them later about having the port published. And id responded with a resounding hell yeah, and the hell yeah story is backed by John Romero himself. The other story of porting drama is from the book Masters of Doom, and it has to do with the Wolfenstein port to the Super Nintendo. When approached about the Super Nintendo port, id at that point wasn't concerned about money anymore. Doom was bringing in about $90,000 a month from shareware sales alone, allowing id to focus on their next project. However, John Romero had become obsessed with deathmatch in Doom, along with the rest of the office. With much of the team screaming at each other over the virtual mayhem they were inflicting on one another, id decided that they didn't want to port the game and would let someone else do it. Id let a freelance programmer with the moniker Burger Bill do the port. Bill was given the name because it was said he hid burgers in his desk so he could work longer. But while Bill was doing the port, a deadline was approaching, and the game wasn't finished. And it wasn't until the deadline had passed that Bill let id know that there was a problem. He also neglected to tell id that he was under contract with Interplay when he took on the contract to do the SNES port of Wolfenstein 3D, making the port the property of Interplay. In typical id fashion, a picture was drawn of Burger Bill and attached to a pillow, and was then stabbed to pieces in the office kitchenette. When Bill came into the office a few days later and stumbled across the carnage, he was fired soon after, uncovering the mayhem. Masters of Doom claims that John Carmack finished the port for the Super Nintendo after that point. And after that drama involving Burger Bill, Nintendo of America had them censor Wolfenstein beyond what they considered acceptable. And in retaliation, it handed over the Wolf 3D engine to a Christian game developer, Wisdom Tree, who went on to make Super Noah's Ark, which is one of the only unlicensed games released for the SNES. The SNES port of Doom was made by Sculpted Software and Randy Linden, a notable programmer who made the Doom engine for the SNES port. The game was also published by Williams Entertainment. Randy Linden's name is in the game code for the SNES version, which actually only appears once in a while when booting the game. It's safe to say that elements of the Masters of Doom story are true in this regard, but it's very much in the vein of entertainment, and stabbing a picture to death fits the overall image that id had in the industry at that time, and it just makes a great story. The Super Nintendo port of Doom actually doesn't use the original Doom engine. It uses a custom engine. And this was because of the limitations of the Super Nintendo. So the game used the Super FX chip to make the graphics of the game possible. The SNES port has many of the same levels as the PC version, but it lacks in graphics, which can chug and kind of go to a lower frame rate. Because of the limited resources of the Super Nintendo, the monsters at a distance actually will fade into the background a bit, making it harder to see them. Also, the monsters only have one side, so no matter what, you only see them from the front, because of these limitations. People often like to state that the Super Nintendo version of the game has the best music out of the early console ports, and that's notable because the Atari Jaguar didn't really have music, and the 32X port didn't have a good audio chip. but all the console ports of Doom have subtle differences. And the SNES port is also unique because it came out at the end of the life cycle of the Super Nintendo in late '95. I found the story of the Super Nintendo port to be the most interesting thing because of the different stories about its creation. This is a simple fix because we still have first-hand accounts available of the events, but it says a lot about something becoming actual history when there's more than one account of the events. Doom is now history, and that is because it is a series of events that connects people now more than ever. Thank you for watching Historic Nerd today. This episode was a little bit more experimental with After Effects, so I was kind of learning some more of the 3D environment stuff you can do. So if you like that, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. Also, I just want to let you know this is the last episode of the 2016, so I hope you guys have a really good year, and I hope we can get through this without it killing any more celebrities or anything that is important to the rest of us, because this has been kind of a crazy year. So, just want to say thank you guys for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day, evening, night, whatever it is you're doing. Thanks, and bye.
You